Here are 3 reports built from the exact same research brief. The only difference is that each one of them was created by a different AI. One is fast, one is detailed, and one may be easier to trust. But how do I decide which one is actually best for the job? I could choose by formatting, confidence, or whichever chatbot writes in the nicest tone. However, that would mostly only tell me which report I enjoyed reading. Instead, I'm going to open the sources and then score all 3 of them on the same 5 things. I gave ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini one practical research job, which represents the kind of research workflow I use all the time. And it goes a little something like this. Prepare a decision brief for a 5-person agency considering a 4-day work week. The brief asks for the evidence, the risks, the costs, the unanswered questions, and a cautious recommendation, which you can see on screen here. However, I added one stricter requirement. Every factual claim has to be grounded in a real source, which is reminiscent of everyday workflows that we may be doing, where we want our reports to be grounded in real data. Primary research gets priority here, and survey claims stay separate from experimental evidence. And if the evidence is incomplete for whatever reason, the report needs to state that instead of smoothing it over. You don't need to know anything technical to follow this video. The goal here is to show you how you can use all of these different AI agents in such a way that will accomplish the goal that you want to. The question I want to ask here is much simpler, however. If you handed these reports to a real decision maker, which one would you trust? On paper, this comparison sounds relatively easy, but paste the same prompt 3 times and we can finally see what comes back. The problem is that ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are not 3 identical boxes with different logos. They have different research modes, search systems, context limits, and ways of presenting their sources. They are also built on different underlying models, and we don't have the complete visibility into their training data or retrieval systems. So if I pretend those differences don't exist, the test looks a lot cleaner. However, it doesn't become more honest. So I'm keeping the parts I can control consistent: the job, the instructions, and the grading rubric. And I'll make the remaining differences visible as we go. So by the end, we'll have a real winner for this research job. But more importantly, you'll have a practical method for choosing the right AI for your own work. The scores stay hidden until we check the sources, but before I show you report A, I need to show you what I actually controlled. Otherwise, every score inherits a hidden assumption. So let's dive in. So this is the prompt we're going to be pasting into Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. You can see here that it's very verbose, but reasonably so. I'm asking it to create primary research or find primary research to tell me a little bit about a 4-day work week for being able to compute some certain things. You can see here that I'm asking it for something very simple, but that can have a lot of ambiguous pathways for completion. So like imagine a 5-person creative agency that is considering a 4-day work week, how would they run their work essentially? So pulling in information about the 4-day work week, pulling in data, research about whether or not it's helpful, and how they can structure their 4-day work week for achieving a similar level of productivity and being able to still stay creative. So anyways, it's not super important what the details of this brief is. The more important thing is that we are going to be 1, evaluating this, and 2, expecting some level of verbosity / pathways to be taken, specifically citing sources and pulling evidence and to ground the claims in. I also asked it if the AI doesn't know what the answer should be or doesn't have any real sources to ground its ideas in, to also note that instead of trying to hallucinate and just trying to please whatever the user who's putting it in needs. Now, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's not super important what this is. This is kind of reflective of what you may expect a long horizon task to be. Any long horizon task for these AI agents is something that requires a lot of intricacies, a lot of internal thinking or reasoning. This may not be as complex as some of the long horizon tasks that you may be doing, like agentic coding, but it is a good reflection of you being able to see the intricacies and the navigation of ambiguity for a lot of these AI agents. So you can read through the prompt here a little bit. I've dropped it below if you'd like to take a look and try this for yourself. But we're going to go ahead and paste this prompt directly into the 3 AI agents and then wait a quick moment for them to respond and then start evaluating. Before we jump into actually pasting this in, I want to show you really quickly the scorecard I'm going to use to try to keep it as fair as possible. This is what it looks like. So we're going to be evaluating on coverage, whether or not it answered every requested part without trying to pad or stuff its response. Factual accuracy, again, that grounding, source quality, how good are the sources it's pulling, because any AI agent now, for the most part, can just use any web search tool and then pull results accordingly. But does it sift through those sources appropriately and try to find the ones that are most reflective of what we're trying to achieve? Citation integrity, so making sure the links are real data, so not fake news, for example. And then decision usefulness, how useful the data that is being presented will be for the agency's end result. This is probably the most important one because you're not going to be using AI for anything except important things that you hopefully would want to use and implement in the future. So here's the prompt. It's a long one, but it includes all of the details that I mentioned already, and we're going to go over evaluating it right after I run it. So I'm going to copy this entire prompt and then paste it into the 3 providers we're going to be working with. So ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. I'll be back in just a moment and we'll see how these did. Okay, so finally all of the results came back, and I decided to format it into a nice little HTML report so we can see it a little bit clearer. If you want to see the process that I did to get this, it was super easy. It was one prompt. All I did was take the responses, fish it into ChatGPT, and then ask it to create a simple HTML web page for me. But if you want to see the prompt for that, just drop a comment below and I can send you a little tutorial on how to do that. So this is what the results came back as. All of them actually had like a decently similar length in terms of the response length. You can see here, Gemini, ChatGPT all feel about the same. I skimmed through each one a little bit, but then I fished it all into the creation process for this here. So anyways, I want to take a look really quickly at this graph. So the table that I showed you right before these results came back outlined the different areas that we were going to be evaluating on. And you can see across the board, ChatGPT, which I was very surprised with, to be quite honest, followed consistently, was able to consistently score very high on all of these dimensions. So I was super happy seeing this, being able to see that ChatGPT or any of these AI providers came really close to kind of a perfect score. And you'll see Claude is a close second. Unfortunately, Gemini didn't seem to do so well. I have a couple theories here, but for the most part, very impressive performance by ChatGPT. One thing to note is that I'm using some of the newer models here that was just kind of recommended to me when I jumped on each one of these platforms. So I'll jump back in here really quickly. So I'm using ChatGPT's instant model, which I believe is I think it's like their Terra model, which is on like some of the lowest thinking modes. This is not an overly complex task. It's a lot of text processing, but a lot of scouring the web and then connecting sources with thoughts from the actual LLM. In agentic coding tasks, it would become a lot more complex and or you would benefit a lot more from using some of the frontier models that they have to offer. So I think the model selection isn't the biggest deal. The Gemini one was the one I was the most surprised with, even though I'm using their Pro model. My biggest theory here as to why Gemini is not performing as well is because of 2 things. The harness and their newest model that just came out, 3.1 Pro, is relatively old by today's standards in terms of how quickly AI models are coming out. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gemini comes out or Google comes out with a model even a week from when this is posted that'll outperform the results here. So just keep that in mind when you're taking a look at these results. Now, the second reason I think Gemini doesn't perform as well in this test is because of the harness. The Gemini harness that you use on the web, I don't think is as good as the harnesses that Claude and ChatGPT have to offer. And harness is the software that wraps around the model that allows it to do things that are in augmentation of the thought process of the model itself. So for example, if the model comes up with some ideas and presents those ideas as text, the harness is the thing that's responsible for being able to determine what pieces of that output text is necessary to then validate and search the web, or provide tooling to the actual response or the LLM so that it's able to go out and search the web, or have some retry loops or mechanisms to ground and source truth for all the responses. So the LLM itself is pretty bare bones. All it does is predict text, but the harness is everything that sits around the LLM, which is available to you transparently, really, to be quite honest, through the Claude, ChatGPT, and the Gemini interface. So just take that as you wish and use that information for whatever decisions you're deciding on making. Now, all of the AIs came back with words that were beyond the limit. So the limit was about 1,500, and all of them came above, with Claude going way above. And then you can actually see here, this is where all of them kind of missed at the very end. But ChatGPT consistently performed really well. Now, if you're taking this and you want to see this report, I'm happy to share it with you. Just drop a comment below, or maybe I'll include it in the description. So just take a look there. But for the most part, you can see the recommendation is if you are doing a research task like this, it might be best to use ChatGPT first. Claude is very verbose from what I found in the response. So it does a really good job of finding a lot of good information. And this is kind of consistent with how Claude has historically been as an LLM provider or as an AI agent. ChatGPT does really good with parsing a lot of different pieces of information and then pulling it in and then making a cohesive like report and doing connections. I've noticed this in my work all the time. Gemini, I would kind of stay away from for these kinds of tasks, at least for right now, unless things change. It's probably really good at what it does for very simple tasks, but for anything that's a little bit more complex at this moment in time, probably best to stay with one of the other AI providers. So this was hopefully a comprehensive rundown on what you can kind of expect in terms of all of the top 3 AI providers right now, in terms of results that you'll be getting if you do ship in something like this. So hopefully it was helpful. And that's it. So as you can see, all of the AI providers did a really good job at being able to give me exactly what I want, but some of them went a lot further in terms of their expertise in being able to pull together a report without me having to continuously prompt it or ask for more results. Now, from the results that we got, it showed that ChatGPT did the best job at pulling together that was comprehensive and cohesive for me to use as a downstream artifact. And I think with a little bit more prompting, although Gemini came in last, a little bit more prompting, you may be able to get to that point. But the goal of this kind of study is to determine which AI provider I can reliably choose and trust without having to kind of babysit and go back and forth. So if you want all of the prompts that I use so you can try this one out yourself, they're all linked in the description below. I'll be doing a lot more builds like this in the near future, so subscribe and give this one a like if you want to see more. And if you have any kind of suggestions for things that you'd like to see me kind of build and or test, drop a comment below and I will make a video on it. See ya.